Greetings, I'm Vertovec, an integrative and emergency physician and a lifelong gardener. If you're comfortable, I invite you to stand, stretch, take some deep breaths, and if you feel safe, consider going barefoot to feel more grounded. Feel free to close your eyes if you like. Let us imagine being a plant, perhaps a young oak tree. Set your feet comfortably because as a plant, you will remain rooted to this spot for your entire life. You can sway your limbs in the wind, but you cannot move. Imagine stretching towards the sun with your leaves spread wide to the sunlight. And imagine being rained on to cleanse and help feed you. Remember that you cannot move to avoid predators, drought, or fire, but be reassured that over 500 million years, you have evolved learning to live, adapt, and reproduce without moving. As a plant, your needs appear simple. Through photosynthesis, you take in sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, transforming them into energy. But your life is so much more complex. Right now, you are standing on the roof of another world. Imagine your feet taking roots, stretching and weaving underground, drawing water and nutrients from the earth, which then traverse up through the xylem, your vascular system, deep inside your trunk, all the way up to the veins in your leaves. Communication above and below ground is central to your existence. Your communication is very complex, but very different from that of animals. In fact, you are an adept chemist capable of producing a vast array of compounds to protect and communicate. You emit volatile organic compounds into the air and produce more than 100,000 different metabolites for communication in your roots. Imagine your roots intertwining with a hidden network of soil microorganisms and fungi in a mutually beneficial relationship called the Wood Wide Web. You can respond to drought, adjust to soil quality, communicate with neighboring plants, and so much more. Imagine sending information to your baby sapling along with water and nutrients. As a tree, you cannot hug your baby, but you protect and provide for it. You also communicate with others of your own species, other plant species, pollinators, microorganisms, and fungi. You manufacture toxins, repellents, and bitter-tasting compounds that deter plant eaters. You attract predators of the insects that feed on you, and you replicate the hormones of female pollinators to attract the males. You release narcotics that intoxicate bees who then stay and pollinate longer. You even produce chemicals like the neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, that mirror those found in animals but serve different functions in plants. Without eyes, ears, nose, or mouth, you engage fully with your environment through a myriad of sensations. Light, moisture, touch, chemicals, and even vibrations are felt and interpreted by your plant body. You also have a sense of balance and gravity. Some plants create noise and can respond to the sounds. Some plants modify their leaf color and shape to mimic plants around them. Your internal clock, the circadian rhythm, is finely tuned to light cycles, guiding when to breathe, grow, and bloom. You sense the sun through your leaves, but also with a deep awareness of its angle, intensity, and timing. You can detect changes in light that tell you if you're shaded by other plants. Though mouthless, you taste the air, detecting chemicals that signal danger, drought, or the presence of plant eaters. The scents that your flowers emit are very complex and unique. Your roots feel their way through the soil, sensing moisture and nutrients, and adjusting their direction to seek the best resources. Now let's explore your organ systems. You are intelligent without a brain. You learn from your experiences, remember them, and solve complicated decisions. You recognize your selfness. You also have coordinated communication between cells to warn of danger. In your cells, chemical changes that encode past stresses help you adjust to future challenges. You breathe through tiny leaf pores or stomata, which are tightly regulated to conserve water. But when too hot, you cool yourself by losing moisture through the stomata, which is your version of sweating. Your vascular system carries water, nutrients, and sugars. You filter pollution from the air and water, like kidneys filter toxins. You grow better when relaxed and not stressed. Your hormones' functions are just as complex as animal hormones. Flowering plants rely on pollinators for reproduction because you cannot move to find a mate. You typically have a reward for the pollinator or the pretense of one. Through coevolution, you have an increasingly selective and complicated pollinator relationship, like the yucca plant, which is solely pollinated by yucca moths. You have an epidermis, an outer layer akin to skin, which protects you from water loss, predations, and excess ultraviolet light. When you are injured, specialized cells trigger the production of strengthening compounds to form scar tissue to prevent infections and water loss. You also produce antimicrobial chemicals that fend off invaders. As a plant, you represent nature's intelligence, evolving as part of a living tapestry that connects you to everything in your ecosystem. You quietly interact with your environment, perceiving, responding, and adapting in ways both subtle and profound. Imagine being rooted in the earth, yet deeply connected to the vast web of life that surrounds you. These are only a few of the amazing abilities of plants. I believe that by understanding the complexity of plants in nature, we will have more respect for these all-life sustaining plants and perhaps more motivation to protect them and their ecosystems. With that, I will switch gears. Please feel free to continue standing if you like. By glimpsing into the extremely complicated and hard to comprehend world of plants, we also touched on extremely complex ecosystems, with every living member having a critical role. And plants are the heart of the nearly 500 unique ecosystems on this earth. Why gardening as guardians of nature? First, by gardening, I mean caring for plants and trees. Guardians of nature? I'm really talking about the importance of biodiversity, including the often ignored plants. If you are fortunate to have a yard, please consider yourself a guardian of the nature in the yard, not an owner. Your time in the yard, even if it is decades, is only a short time for your trees, which can live up to hundreds of years. There are many ways to be a guardian. Aldo Leopold said, "We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." I need to mention biodiversity loss. The UN, World Health Organization, top scientists, including E.O. Wilson and Jane Goodall, and multiple environmental groups, view biodiversity loss as one of the greatest threat to humanity. This concern arises from the critical role biodiversity plays in maintaining ecosystems that support all life on Earth. E.O. Wilson advocated for the Half Earth Project, where half of the planet's land and sea would be conserved to preserve biodiversity. Global biodiversity is declining at an alarming rate, with extinction 1,000 times higher than natural rates, largely due to human activities. Over 75% of Earth's land ecosystems are altered with habitat loss and fragmentation. An estimated 40% of the world's plant species are threatened with extinction. Habitat destruction, agriculture, climate change, invasive species, and pollution are key drivers of this decline. Yet helping biodiversity seems so far away, rainforests on other continents. But there are things we all can do to protect biodiversity. Let's return to gardening. 1/3 of Americans garden, and 92% of them garden at home. But there are community gardens in all 50 states, including at schools and medical centers. Gardens cover about 25% of urban land area and are the most readily accessible green spaces because 80% of Americans live in urban areas. Gardens have great potential for limiting the ongoing loss of human-nature interaction and for promoting biodiversity. Here is a summary of the multiple health benefits described in gardening research. Gardeners are outside, exercising, using creativity, and learning about failure. Even if you don't have a home or community garden accessible, you will derive health benefits from having plants indoors, and the easiest way is to grow herbs in water. Not all herbs will grow in water, but here you have dill, parsley, mint, basil, and whole scallions. Humans began cultivating plants for food and medicine around 3000 BCE, and eventually gardens became more ornamental. With world exploration, gardeners discovered and desired exotic, non-native plants. This focus on non-native plants continues today in most garden centers. And the problem with non-native species is that they have no natural predator or co-evolved insects. The delicate native ecosystem is completely disrupted with the exotic plants overpowering the native plants and reducing the pollinator population and all life that relied on the native plants. In addition, large lawns have become a symbol of wealth and status, but lawns are dead zones for the ecosystem and its living beings. Humans unknowingly harm nature by gardening with non-native plants and by creating a forced garden from a specific vision, which requires labor, intensive mowing, trimming, replanting, along with lots of water, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, fertilizer, etc. Although this is beautiful, this garden does not promote biodiversity. What if you could garden with beautiful plants already adapted to your zip code, not requiring chemicals or significant care? It can be done. What if each of us lucky enough to have a yard dedicates part of it to a native garden? Being careful to make it look intentional to keep the neighbors happy, and perhaps with signage to explain your intent. This sign says, "Bee Friendly Garden." This is the bold idea promoted by Homegrown National Park, We Are the Ark, and other organizations. Doug Tallamy, the author of this book, Nature's Best Hope, and co-founder of Homegrown National Park, stated that in the past, we have asked one thing of our gardens, that they be pretty. Now they have to support life, sequester carbon, feed pollinators, and manage water. Homegrown National Park is a resource for gardeners who want to plant native plants. It has 42,000 members with over 100,000 acres of native habitat on its map, including balcony containers and schoolyards. This group inspired my neighbor to start a grassroots community called Growing Native, which has worked to plant native trees, promote dark skies, and ban gas-powered blowers. Growing Native also planted this beautiful demonstration native garden with signage about the plants and what pollinators they support, and a free library featuring native-related books. So gardening's environmental benefits include being one of the most common ways to interact with nature, thus promoting a greater awareness and appreciation of local nature. And gardens make up 1/4 of urban green spaces. But gardening with native plants and trees also filters more air and water, sequesters more carbon, controls stormwater, provides habitat for wildlife, promotes biodiversity, and improves soil health. Why native? Because they have already adapted to the local ecosystem and are more resistant to frost, drought, flood, and common diseases. So they are most likely to survive in this time of climate change. They are not invasive, but they are food and shelter sources for native insects and wildlife. They are low maintenance with less need for watering, mowing, pesticides, fertilizers, and other chemicals. And they protect at-risk species, biodiversity, and stewardship of our natural heritage. Why native trees? Well, for all the reasons I mentioned. Plus, trees reduce urban heat island effects, provide shade and conserve energy, reduce noise, and increase home property value. I had to include just one study. This study shows a decrease in mortality with increased exposure to a natural environment, with the greatest mortality reduction occurring in the lowest income group, which is represented by the lightest bars. As you go from left to right, you can see the difference in mortality decreases, and especially in the light bar or the lowest income group. So what can each of us do to promote biodiversity? We all can turn off outdoor lights to avoid harming the migrating birds, the nighttime pollinators and animals, and the plants with their sensitive circadian rhythm. We can avoid harmful chemicals, including pesticides. We can work with our local government to add native green space and to ban gas-powered blowers, which cause air and noise pollution. Those with a yard, balcony, or a community garden should decrease grass areas if possible. Plant native trees and get your community to. Plant native plants and shrubs. There are great websites to help with this because you want to avoid cultivars and other greenwashed nursery plants that can actually harm insects. You also provide shelter, food, and water for the yard wildlife, and avoid the fall leaf and garden cleanups, especially in the garden beds, because the leaves and the stems are the winter home of the pollinators and other native life. You don't want to mulch the leaves, that will kill them. Finally, we need to tolerate the critters. When you add native, the insects and the wildlife will come, and at first you may be overrun with one type, say voles, or here, aphids, but the predators will find them, and the balance in nature will ensue. Here, the ladybugs have arrived to eat the aphids. In the 1500s, Michel de Montaigne said, "Let us permit nature to have her way. She understands her business better than we do." Thank you. There's my email. Feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. I have references, further reading, and organizations, but don't worry, these will be available to you also. Thank you.